In news that will shock absolutely no one, a study by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce shows that 1 in 20 Ontario businesses plan to leave the province or just shut down because of exorbitant power prices. Do you doubt it? I mean, how many companies have left in the past few years alone? Especially electricity-intensive manufacturing companies, the kind of places where blue-collar workers used to get serious six-figure jobs, like, that old Caterpillar factory in London, Ontario a couple years ago, or the Kellogg's food processing factory, 500 jobs, or Heinz leaving with 740 jobs. Don't worry, I'm not going to list them all. We don't have that much time. And for each one of these companies, power prices were a key factor. Ontario has the highest power prices in the continent. And that's not some blip that's going to come down. It is the Ontario government's official plan. I mean, it's what they're saying they're going to do. They have announced in advance that they will continue to increase electricity prices each year for the next 20 years. They've said it. It's not a surprise. For many Ontario companies, the cost of power is their largest expense after salaries, so they're just moving, or at least not investing anymore in Ontario. What's so ironic and so sad is that power prices in the United States, especially in places like Pennsylvania that are real competitors to Ontario, are falling drastically. How come Ontario's power prices are going up when our competitor states are going down? Well, it's because Ontario's radical premier, Kathleen Wynne, has an environmental extremist approach to energy. She forces everyone in Ontario to subsidize extremely expensive wind turbines and solar power installations that would never be economic on their own. But as part of her environmentalist agenda, she subsidizes them by paying them many more times than market rates for power and locking into long-term contracts with them. That's why Ontario's Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli can say with perfect confidence that energy prices, yes, are going to go up for 20 years in a row, because that is actually his plan. Compare that to Pennsylvania. It used to be a very tough economy there as the coal mines and the steel mills were shut down. But then the fracking boom came along. Pennsylvania has a lot of shale rock that has natural gas in it. And in the past 5 or so years, Pennsylvania has become a boom town again with 200,000 new jobs created in fracking. Seriously, they now produce more natural gas in Pennsylvania than even Texas does. And it's so plentiful and so cheap, and by the way, so clean, that Pennsylvania's power plants, they now burn natural gas, which is so cheap that the average Pennsylvania family's energy bill has fallen by $1,000 a year. Fallen! And that's just for average families. For big manufacturers, the savings are so huge that factories are literally moving to the United States from foreign countries, back to the US again. Have you ever even heard of that? Seriously, for like 20 years, the story has been offshoring. Companies moving to China or India or wherever to make cheaper stuff and then export it back to the US because their labor is so cheap in China. But now that the US has the cheapest energy in the world outside of some subsidized OPEC dictatorships, factories are actually being built in the US because it's that much cheaper. In Pennsylvania, ethane refineries, petrochemical refineries, new ones are being built and proposed constantly in Pennsylvania, a place that just 5 years ago was the heart of the Rust Belt. I mean, look at these gorgeous new or expanded factories and refineries and pipelines. Mark West Energy Partners, Sunoco, Marcus Hook. When was the last time a big company like that announced it was going to invest billions of dollars in Ontario? Other than when the government pays its frequent bribes to the big 3 automakers not to shut down, but that doesn't really count, does it? So 200,000 real new jobs in fracking in Pennsylvania. $1,000 a year per family in cheaper power. And huge multi-billion-dollar factories being built for the first time in decades? That's Pennsylvania. Oh, and not a dollar in public money. The opposite, actually. Huge amounts of new tax revenue for the public. Compare that to Ontario. Government schemes to enrich wind turbine lobbyists. The wind turbines are being built in places like South Korea and then shipped to Ontario for assembly. So not a lot of jobs in Canada except for putting the wind turbines up for a few days. And then the lobbyists who got the wind turbine contracts just sit back and collect hugely inflated checks whenever the wind turbines work. See, that's the thing. Despite all the billions of dollars shoveled into wind turbines in Ontario, over the objections of local residents who hate the ugly, noisy, vibrating, bird-killing skyscrapers, they don't work most of the time. Here's a look at Ontario's electricity website. As you can see, the province uses about 15 or 16,000 megawatts of power at any given moment. and only 1.7% comes from wind. And solar, which is even more ridiculous and even more expensive, only accounts for 0.2% of Ontario power. So an entire generation of Ontarians will pay double what they should for electricity for some Greenpeace experiment that doesn't even work half the time. Half the time, I wish. Ontario has 2,925 megawatts of wind turbine power bought and paid for, but right now literally 90% of those wind turbines are not producing energy. They're just not spinning. So Ontario has to actually have two different power systems at the same time. A real reliable power system through hydroelectric dams, nuclear reactors, natural gas power plants, things that work all the time, whether it's windy or not, whether it's sunny or not. And then the make-believe political power system, wind turbines, solar panels. That's why power prices are going up for the next 20 years. That's why, according to a Leger poll, 81% of Ontarians think that power prices are going to hurt the economy. That's why 1 in 20 businesses say power prices will drive them out. Oh, but stop being so negative, right? It just means we get to celebrate Earth Hour, when we all turn off the lights and shiver in the dark like North Korea. We'll get to celebrate Earth Hour a lot more. For TheRebel.media, I'm Ezra Levant.